Hello everyone, it's Smytepants Chess here once again, and we're going to look at CCC11 finals between Leela and Stockfish. And today it's reversed fixture of yesterday's game. So here Leela is playing white and Stockfish is playing black. And I've gone back to the chess base board because I'm just more comfortable with it. But Leela's kicked off with d4, we get knight to f6, c4, c5, d5 and e6. This is the end of the book, and sides are reversed in this game, so now Leela's playing white and Stockfish has to play this Benoni opening. So Leela actually plays the same move as Stockfish, played knight c3, reinforcing this d5 pawn. And Stockfish played a very rare move now. They played the move bishop to d6. And this doesn't come up very often in the opening books, but it seems like the plan is to play bishop to e5. And just solidify the centre this way. So play continued e4 from Leela. Stockfish now played bishop to e5 and knight Qe2 from white. Stockfish captured on d5, Leela recaptured, and then black played d6. So black's got a very solid structure in the centre, and this is quite a nice way to play it because this bishop does a good job outside the pawn chain, and now this bishop for black is free to roam out. And these two pawns are very good in the centre for black. So Leela plays f4. I think this move is mandatory because it's got to remove this bishop off e5. Black takes on c3, the knight recaptures, and Stockfish castle kingside and prepares the move rook to e8. So really white does have to play bishop d3 here to reinforce e4. But now Stockfish kind of exploits this e4 weakness, and Stockfish plays c4, attacking the bishop on d3. So Leela's got a decision to make. I was thinking bishop takes c4 seems the obvious idea here. Bishop takes c4. But Stockfish can actually play knight takes e4. And if we recapture it with the knight, black can play rook e8. So they're hitting this knight on e4 now. If queen e2, black can play bishop f5 and has two pieces attacking the knight again. If we play bishop to d3 to defend, then black can actually take on e4, and after bishop takes e4, play the move f5. And this has a nice game for black all of a sudden. Perhaps after bishop to f5, white could actually play knight to f6. The point is if the queen takes a knight, then queen takes e8 will be played by white. So after doubling black's pawns, white can play bishop to e3. And if a move like queen e7 here, white can play king f2 and has actually a really nice game and just doubled black's pawns for nothing. But in this position after bishop to e3, black can play a very nice move b5. The point is that it attacks the bishop on c4 and prepares queen a5 check. For instance, bishop takes b5, then we can play rook takes e3, queen takes, and then queen a5 with check, and we'll take the bishop next move. So after b5, white should play bishop to b3, but now we actually have an equal game and black's doing quite well. So if we just go straight back to the game, c4 was just played, so that's the reason why white shouldn't take the pawn on c4. It just leads to those complicated positions where black is trying to equalise. So Leela played bishop c2 for this reason. Stockfish continues the development with queen to b6, dominating the dark square, stopping white from castling, because it covers all this long diagonal. So Leela plays a4, prepares a5. Maybe black could play a5 in this position, but having looked at it, white can play queen to e2. And after rook to e8, white should play queen f2, and after capturing twice and knight to a6, white can play f5 and block their white diagonal bishop. If knight c5, then king f3 is absolutely fine for white, and if anything, white is slightly better in this position. So instead of playing a5 in the game, Stockfish played knight to a6, maybe preparing to go knight c5. Leela played a5 though, he attacks the queen and the queen retreats to c5. White plays queen to e2, maybe preparing bishop to e3. But now Stockfish strikes in with bishop to g4, attacking the queen. It goes to f2 and there's a trade of queens, and black retreats with bishop to d7. I think this is an important move by Stockfish, otherwise white suddenly can play h3 and g4 really quickly with tempos, so that's why black retreated the bishop backwards. Leela played bishop to d2, knight to b4 from Stockfish, attacking the bishop, and Leela can retreat this to b1, and it's very important that this bishop still maintains this diagonal, securing the e4 pawn and this d3 square. Stockfish plays knight g4 check, king f3 to attack the knights and get the king into a centre for the endgame now, because the queens are off the board. There's not that much danger for white. And I think black played a very impressive move now. They played the move f5. The point is that black has to be aggressive, otherwise white will just simply play h3 and g4 and dominate the king side. So f5 is pretty much mandatory in this position. E takes f5 is played by Leela, but now black has to be a bit careful, because if they recapture, let's say bishop takes f5, white can play bishop takes f5, after rook takes f5, king takes g4 just wins a piece for white. So black has to be patient after white captures on f5. Stockfish plays knight to f6, retreats the knight from safety and maybe can recapture the pawn at a later date. But it seems as though black may have found himself in a bit of a bad position at the moment. I'd be thinking, as a human player, I'd want to play h3 and g4 as soon as possible and secure his king side. And it looks very nice for white all of a sudden. Rook c1 is played by Leela, so eyeing up this c4 pawn. Rook a e8 from black, and now knight to e4. And this is a very interesting move, so all of a sudden there's a massive load of discovered attacks for white. The bishop attacks the knight on b4, the rook attacks the pawn on c4, and the knight on e4 attacks the pawn on d6. Black takes the knight off then, knight takes e4 and the bishop recaptures. And the bishop for white is still attacking this knight, so Stockfish has got to do something about it. I was thinking knight to d3, but actually white gains an advantage with rook takes c4, and if knight takes b2, white can simply play rook to b4 and trap the knight on b2. So after rook takes c4, knight c5 may be possible, but white gains an advantage with bishop to b4, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, rook takes rook, king takes rook, bishop takes f5, and then just king d4. And black's got to defend the pawn on d6 with the rook, but now white can play h3, and if h5, white can go a6, and after b6, rook c1, white definitely has the advantage in this endgame. White's just going to play rook c7 and try and win this a7 pawn, or this weak d6 pawn. So going back to the game, so instead of moving the knight, Stockfish goes in for a little tactic. They play rook takes e4. And the point of this move is that after king takes e4, black takes on f5, so they regain their pawn back. The king goes to d4, and black now plays knight to c2, so forks the king and the rook. So Leela has to give back the exchange. She plays rook takes c2, there's bishop takes c2. And we're into an opposite bishop coloured endgame with a rook for both sides, and at the moment it's also equal material. I was thinking king takes c4 for white here. Black could go bishop to e4 though, and if g3, rook f5, they can win the pawn back. If a6, bishop takes d5 check, king d4. We're into a very equal endgame. So instead of pawn grabbing, Leela plays rook to e1 here. I was also thinking for black bishop to d3 here to retain this pawn on c4, but I think white gains an advantage with g4, because after king f7, rook e6 attacking the d6 pawn, rook d8 and bishop to b4. White's just going to win this pawn instead and has a much better position. So after rook to e1, black's also got to be quite quick. They play king f7 to get the king into the centre. Bishop b4 attacks the d6 pawn, rook d8 defends, and then g4 from white. So we're into a sort of similar position as we looked at in that variation. Stockfish plays h5 though. And now white has to be really precise. I actually dug really deep here and looked at this variation with h3 if white plays this and tries to hold on to the pawn on g4 and not double them. But black can play rook e8, and if we go into it with takes, bishop takes d6, h takes g4, h takes g4, bishop to d1 from black attacking the pawn, g5, bishop g4 and king takes, and g6, bishop to b8 and a6 and b4. And we're into an opposite bishop coloured endgame where white is trying to pass one of these pawns, but after going through a series of moves, white can't break through. Black just about barely holds on here, so we put into this position, bishop to e4 check, king to b6, and just bishop to g2, and there's no way for white to advance this a6 pawn. Just king c8 and then bishop to c3, bishop to f3, bishop to d4. It's impossible for white to break through. Black's just going to manoeuvre their bishop on this diagonal, and the king can come to d7 whenever it needs to, and just follow white's king around. So, having gone through this variation, it seems to end in a draw. If we go back to this position, I also tried king b8 here for whites, but again, bishop to d3 stops a6. If king a7, black can play king to c8. And if a6, just bishop to f5. And there's no way for white to break through. Even if they go back here with king to b6, let's say, black can just play again bishop to e4. And black just dominates the white squares. And this is the problem with opposite coloured bishop endgames. Usually end in draws. So back to the game though, where black just played h5. So instead of playing h3, Leela actually decided to take the pawn off. And I think this is the right idea. G takes h5. So it just wins another pawn for white, and this increases white's advantage, even though the pawns are doubled up. Play continued, bishop to f5 from Stockfish. Leela played rook to g1, bishop to d3, and then rook to g5. b6, and now a6. So the point is, this is a really strong pawn, and now a7 becomes really weak, and we have the correct bishop for white to exploit this a7 weakness. Rook d7 was played by Stockfish, king c3. Bishop to e2, king d2, and again there's a lot of manoeuvring around with the bishop and the king, but eventually you see that Leela gets these pawns in some sort of solid position, and again there's a lot of checks and bishop moves, but I'll get to the good bit soon. So he gets a bishop to c3, and actually black takes on a6 here, the king goes to b4, but the point is now that white is attacking this g7 pawn, and it's going to be very hard for black to defend. So he played rook g8, but now rook g6 from Leela, attacking the d6 pawn. Bishop to d3 attacks the rook, but then just rook takes d6, rook f8, and frankly white's just winning this position now. You could play rook to d7 as well here if they wished. After king e8, just take on g7, rook takes f4, but white still wins with king a3, bishop c2, so black can threaten some mates, but after b3, rook to f3 and just king b2. It should be an easy win for white from here on in. Rook f2, just bishop to d4, and then just d6, and if bishop f5 check, the king can run. Rook takes h4, but just rook e7, and then play bishop f6, and this is a very nice move, because if rook h3 is rook e5 check, the king moves and rook takes f5. This is an easy one endgame for white. So yeah, rook d7 was certainly possible for Leela to play in this position, but play continued, just bishop e5, and then just king e7. And if we carry on, white plays h6, so tries to get a queen, but takes played, and then rook f7. But how does Leela win from here? Well, she plays king to d4, gets in the centre, king e8, and then rook h8, rook f8, and takes twice, and attacks a7 with bishop to b8 from white, and gets the king in the centre. So now it's quite an easy win for white actually. White's just going to advance the pawns up the board, and eventually gets a queen, and Leela advances both pawns up the board. She could easily get a queen here, to be honest. So we'll play through this really quickly now. So bishop goes back and forth for Leela, and she finally gets a queen. And eventually it's king and queen checkmate, as we always see. And Leela beats Stockfish once again. So again, I think black is at a disadvantage with this Modern Benoni opening. White usually wins these two games between computers, but I thought Leela's way of winning it was very nice. It just exploited the d6 weakness. It was around here. I may have gone over it too fast in the analysis, but after king f2, rook d7 to protect d6, white manages to get their king into the centre of the board, and after a few more moves, takes on c4. It's pretty much game over, because all the pawns for black are on dark squares, and white just exploits these weaknesses. And it's very good play from Leela, and very Karpovian actually, just playing very positional moves and dominating the dark squares. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the analysis. Please drop me a like, comment or subscribe if you want to watch more chess videos in the future. I've got a few more of these games to go through, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.